Chapter 9. A Charming Man. In the morning, the sound of the other girls getting up woke Lydia far more effectively than an alarm clock. She peered out from behind the hangings around her bed. Abby was pulling on her robes beside the next bed. "Hi, Lydia," she greeted her. "Come on, breakfast time." Lydia blinked and stretched her eyes a few times, got out of bed, and washed in the bowl on the stand next to her bed. The water was deliciously warm again, and she seemed to be dry as soon as the fluffy white towel touched her. She dressed in another change of clothes, left her pyjamas and the previous day's clothes at the foot of her bed, as instructed. She also donned the black robes she found there. Jessica and Abby were waiting at the door for her. She met up with Tessa over breakfast. She had a salad of fruit and some yogurt, followed by a slice of toast, all washed down with cold spiced pumpkin juice. "Are you all right tagging along with the girls to classes, Lydia?" Tessa asked. "I desperately need to catch up with some revision. If you need me, I'll be in our common room. You've got Flitwick, first period. He's a sweetie. It looks like he's a friend of your uncle now as well." They looked up to the top table. Lydia's uncle and Professor Flitwick were laughing and joking together. Lydia assured Tessa that she would be fine, and then went with her new friends back up to Gryffindor Tower to collect their books. Lydia was getting used to the route up to the tower. It gave her an opportunity to look around more as they went. There seemed to be activity everywhere. It was more than just the students scurrying up and down the myriad of stairways and corridors. She realised it was, of course, the movement of the figures in the paintings again. It gave the impression that the walls of the castle were in constant motion. She waved to the figures in a painting of children in old-fashioned clothes playing with a puppy in a beautiful meadow. Some of the children stopped for a moment to wave back. Lydia beamed with delight. Lydia also noticed that some of the suits of armour she had seen the previous night appeared to be in different places. Either someone had moved them to polish them, or... She shuddered. Children and puppies in paintings were all very well, but suits of armour wandering the corridors were a different matter. Perhaps that was why they were not supposed to be out of the dormitory at night. She'd assumed it was to let the cleaners, house elves she expected, get about their work. Perhaps not. As they reached their dormitory, her new friends grabbed their books and grasped their bags. Lydia felt odd that she was not carrying anything. She thought she should be taking notes, but then, being a muggle, she had no right to copy down their magical secrets. So she just rocked on her heels for a while until the others were ready. "What classes do you have today?" she asked Jessica. "Charms and Transfiguration this morning. Herbology all afternoon, with Neville," Jessica giggled, looking at Abby. Abby blushed. "I like Professor Longbottom. He's a really nice man," Lydia said in support of Abby. Abby blushed even more. "Come on, you lot," one of the other girls called. Poppy something, Lydia partly remembered. They resumed their rush. Down to the common room, out of the portrait hole, down some stairs, along a corridor, through a doorway behind a tapestry, down some more stairs, along another corridor, and so on. They joined a group of students outside a classroom door. The door opened of its own accord. "Come in, please, everybody," came a squeaky voice from inside. They filed in. It was much like any classroom in terms of its layout, with the teacher's desk at the far end and pairs of desks in rows facing the teacher. However, there was no hiding the fact that they were in an old stone-built castle. The walls were grey stone with arches and columns like a church. The windows were leaded, and some had stained glass, but were less like a church because they showed people in tall, pointed hats and brandishing wands. The ceiling vaulted high above, and was painted with gaudy scenes depicting knights and dragons and wizards. "Ah, Miss Ward," Professor Flitwick called. "I would be delighted if you would join me." With his wand he conjured a chair next to his, behind the teacher's desk, and gestured to it. Lydia's new friend smiled and pushed her forwards. She went to the front of the class and around the end of the desk. To her surprise, the professor was not sitting on a high-seated chair, but on an ordinary chair with a stack of books on the seat, topped with a couple of cushions, to raise him to a level where he could look out over the whole class. Flitwick looked down at her and smiled. "Well, I am pleased to meet you at last. Even more so because you seem to be hardly much taller than I am. Please, allow me." With a swirl of his wand, he made the legs on Lydia's chair grow, to raise the seat higher. Then with a flick, he added a squashy cushion. "Much better," he pronounced. "Please, do join me." Lydia clambered up. It was unusually high, but stable and perfectly comfortable. "I saw you talking to my uncle at dinner last night," Lydia said. "Indeed," Flitwick nodded vigorously. "What a delightful fellow! One of the most humorous gentlemen of my acquaintance." Lydia sagged. Did the professor always talk like this, or had he caught something from Uncle Ambrose? She decided it would not be polite to ask. "Forgive me for a moment, young lady," Flitwick continued. "I will address the class and give them their task. Then perhaps we can talk in peace, and I promise to do my best to answer any questions you might have." "Thank you, Professor. Please carry on. I don't want to get in your way." Flitwick smiled a warm smile, then turned to the class. "In your next lesson," he called out, "this Friday morning, I thought we might celebrate the examination season that will be starting next week by having a concise quiz on the work we have done this academic year." The students groaned. "Being the generous fellow I am, I decided to give you this lesson in which to brush up on your work and do some practicing." As he stressed the last word, he swept his wand through the air. Small pieces of parchment sprang from the end of the wand and fluttered out over the heads of the seated students. All at once, each note dropped with a thump onto the desk in front of a student, as if the parchment had suddenly turned to lead. There was one note each. Some were larger than others. "These are my recommendations for the things you need to practice," he explained. "Once you can do them faultlessly, you may practice anything you like, as long as it's something we have covered." A murmuring rumbled around the class, and the students shuffled to take out their books and their wands. "Our guest, Miss Ward, and I shall have a chat. Then," he said in his sternest voice, "we shall pass among you, and you can demonstrate to us how clever or otherwise you are." To be honest, Professor Flitwick's sternest tone was not exactly terrifying, but as a pupil, Lydia could tell when a teacher was trying. Lydia and Flitwick, call me Phileas if none of the students are listening, had an amiable and wide-ranging chat about the Muggle and magical worlds, about Harry's school days and the Battle of Hogwarts, about Uncle Ambrose and what an exceptionally charming character he was. This last subject was embarrassing for Lydia. She was unable to understand why Flitwick liked her uncle so much, and, moreover, surprised to find how little she could tell the professor about him. Flitwick cut the conversation short, however, realizing he had forgotten to check on his students. They slid down from their seats at Flitwick's desk and strolled quietly between the rows of desks. Thankfully, most of the young witches and wizards were coming along well. Flitwick was delighted with their progress. Near the back of the class, they came across one boy, Dev, who was struggling with something to do with a feather. "How are you doing, Mr. Perec?" Flitwick asked. "I've got somewhere with most of them, Professor," he muttered, giving a dejected glance at his piece of parchment. "This one always seems to evade me, though." Lydia noticed that the piece of parchment which had landed on his desk was the largest she had seen. There was quite a list of charms for him to practice. "Please show me," Flitwick asked in a kindly whisper. "I might be able to spot something." The boy flourished his wand with a swish from the side ending in a flick and said, "Wingardium Leviosa." The feather seemed to twitch, but that might have been from the movement of his wand through the air. Flitwick looked genuinely puzzled. "I can only put it down to a lack of confidence, my dear boy." Dev looked dejected. "Every first-year class has someone who struggles in the beginning," Flitwick told him. "They always get there in the end. Just between the three of us, I well remember a young man struggling just like you are. He's now a professor and a hero. His name was Neville Longbottom." "Oh!" Lydia exclaimed. "Excuse me, but is your wand a new one?" The boy looked at her and frowned. "It was my uncle's. Why do you ask, Miss Ward?" "Lydia, please." She smiled and looked from the boy to the professor and back. "Professor Longbottom told me, the night before last, that he had always struggled. He started school with his dad's wand, and it got broken in a fight at the ministry, and when he got a new one, everything got easier. Mr. Potter, head aura Potter, he said the wand chooses the wizard, or it doesn't work its best." The boy and his professor were staring at her. "I thought it might be something to do with that," she ventured. "Do you know, young lady?" Flitwick looked astonished. "Professor Longbottom has told me that story, and it never occurred to me that it might apply. Mr. Perec, I will contact your parents. We will take you to Diagon Alley this Saturday, and, if I have to buy it myself, we will find a wand which chooses you." Dev looked so delighted. His eyes were shining with tears, and he blinked several times. "Thank you, sir. Thank you, Miss Lydia." Well, Flitwick murmured as they walked back to his desk. "I must thank you as well, dear Lydia. Poor Dev is such a promising boy academically, but his wand work has always let him down. If this has been his problem all along, then you have done the both of us an immensely great service, my girl. Even if it is not his problem, I imagine you will still have given his confidence a boost. Yes, I expect great things from Mr. Perec, all thanks to you." Lydia could have exploded with delight. The one thing she wanted to do to help make the world that tiny bit better for having her in it. Thankful, she smiled and blushed. Flitwick wound up the lesson in high spirits. He sent the class off to their next lessons with a cheery wave. The Gryffindors to Transfiguration with Professor Marcus, the Ravenclaws to Potions with Professor Heisenberg. Lydia joined Jessica, Abby, and the others on another meandering journey along corridors, behind wall hangings, through hidden doors, up and down stairs, and across landings, until they reached the Transfiguration corridor. As the students were gathering outside the classroom door and chattering like a troop of monkeys, Lydia saw Tessa bustling down the corridor towards them. "Hello, Tessa," she greeted her. "Hi, Lydia. Hi, everyone," Tessa said a little breathlessly. "Glad I caught you before you went in." "What's wrong?" "What? Oh, nothing. I've just been sent to fetch you. Harry Potter and the others want to see you. I think it's good news." The Gryffindor girls looked at Lydia, deeply impressed. "See you later," Lydia said, as though it was the most natural thing in the world for a 10-year-old to be summoned by the head aura for a chat.